Hello, I'm Ed Peters from GE Coaching, and it's a great privilege to have a few moments to talk with you about leadership, because leadership has been a strong part of our webinar work recently. And of course, good leadership is going to be the core to a successful resetting of the economy after the pandemic. In fact, if you look at those lists of qualities that are said to be really vital for the future, they fall into two categories. On the one hand, you have high levels of technical skill, which of course we'll need in an AI and big data driven economy. But of course, on the other hand, you have those personal skills, which are going to become more and more important. That ability to manage teams, manage other people, to encourage innovation and creativity, and above all, to lead and influence. So strong leaders in the future are going to be important in many, many ways. And for those of you thinking of starting and running your own companies now, of course, even on a smaller scale, you need leadership. You need to have a strong direction. You need to encourage others to understand and follow what you're trying to put forward. How do we do that? Well, firstly, I think we have to put to one side notions of leadership that are not appropriate. So the older models based on hierarchy, where your experience and talent put you slightly further up the food chain, and you are able then to turn around and either tell people what to do or to dispense advice or guidance or opinion. The people below you duly did what you said, then they in turn were promoted until they became leaders and told other people what to do. And of its time, it was fine. But where we need the type of adaptability, flexibility and creativity that the modern economy is said to require, that model doesn't quite work anymore. As coaches, let me give you some idea of what we think is important to future leaders and see if you agree. Firstly, and above all else, the fact that people need to understand themselves really well. How do you tick? What triggers your responses? How do you behave, and how does that relate to other people being different, and to your own beliefs and values from your own background and influences? Once you get a feeling of how that functions, you're in a much better position to lead. Secondly, and linked to this, if you understand yourself better, you must also understand others better. And sometimes it's said that people at interview will tend to choose subconsciously people who are rather like themselves, which is not always what you need. You don't need a company full of people like you. You need people who are going to disagree or come up with left field ideas that you wouldn't have thought of. So therefore, understanding what makes people different means that they can contribute more to what you want to achieve. They're not being awkward, they're not being irritating, they're just different in the way they see life. And the more that you appreciate that, the more you'll benefit from it as a leader and contribute to that process. Thirdly, do you as a leader set clear goals? Do you actually know what you're trying to achieve in some detail? If you do, fantastic. Then how do you communicate that to people? How do you make sure you've got the resources you need to deliver those goals? How can you make sure that everyone understands not just what those goals are, but what their purpose is? What are you doing this for at a deeper level? Because that's what really drives people. And we have lots of evidence to prove this nowadays. Salary is not enough. They need purpose. And then when your purpose is clear and your resources are in place, have you thought about the obstacles that you may need to overcome, which may cause your team to lose their motivation a little bit? Have you got that in play and thought through so that everybody knows what's happening? So your goals have got to be really, really clear, and you as the leader are responsible for managing that whole process. Next point, how well do you listen? We have this cultural idea that somebody who is a leader must talk a lot, and that the more you talk, the more sense you make. Now, we all know from our experience that is simply not true. Therefore, how could we talk less and listen more? The great thing about listening is that although you may feel you're doing nothing, if you listen closely enough and rule out the distractions, people will be really impressed by how well they feel you've understood them, even if you've actually contributed very little. They will feel heard, they will feel validated, they will feel a lot better about their work. So before you have that temptation always to jump in and solve things for people, try listening first. It'll be far more powerful. Simply dispensing advice doesn't give people the motivation to go out and do it for themselves the next time. All it does is tell them to keep coming back to you, which doesn't help you and doesn't help them. Think about your listening skills. And linked to listening is the power of the questions we ask. We're very good at asking questions that suggest the answer we want to hear. Don't you feel it would be a good idea if is about as strong a leading question as you can get, and they can be much subtler than that. So let's keep our questions open. In coaching we talk a lot about clean language that doesn't have any bias about it. What would you do? How about that as a question? What could you suggest? What do you think might be better than this? What do you feel we ought to start with? All of those are completely neutral questions, and your team members would feel very pleased to be invited in. But don't leave those on. The trick is often that those questions become a hook, a bit of a trap for people. They think they're safe, they come and say something, and then the boss suddenly just turns it all round and says what he wants. And the asking questions was just a gimmick. Make sure that if you ask questions, you listen to the answers, you genuinely frame your questions well, and you have faith in that questioning process. Do that and you'll be amazed at the results. Next point, do we actually learn from people? As a boss, again looking at the old way we used to think, bosses are meant to know more than other people. The fact of the matter is, you're going to have people working with you or for you as part of your larger team or contact group who will have skills that you simply don't have. How many times have bosses intervened in marketing conversations when they're not specialist marketers? There's so much danger in that direction. Learn from other people, get them to explain it to you, and listen again, and they will be amazed at how erudite you actually are. And finally, being a boss is certainly about being a coach, and we've talked a lot about coaching skills here. It's also about taking delight in the progress and talent of other people. And as a modern leader, you're going to derive the most fulfillment from the successes of others, and not simply from what you do yourself. Trust this process, and again, you'll be amazed at how good a leader you become simply by taking the focus away from yourself and towards other people. I hope that helps. Be very keen to hear any feedback you have. Thank you. Bye-bye.